Welcome to Lead Different, the podcast that redefines leadership and challenges the status quo. Hosted by Daniel Dominguez, founder and CEO of Why Not Leadership. This show is your compass to becoming a better leader through the power of self-awareness. Good leaders foster teams that are engaged, empowered, and energized. Join us on this transformative journey as we equip you with the tools and insights to lead different. Get ready to challenge the ordinary and embrace self-aware leadership. This is Lead Different.
Subscribe now. Discover a new era of leadership. Lead different, because great leaders change the world.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lead Different podcast. We are here today with Rebecca Maestas Sanchez. You know, Rebecca Maestas Sanchez is a principal at St. Mary's Catholic School in Albuquerque, and I've got some history with that school. So she's already got a special place in my heart. She's an alumni of the Archdiocese of Santa Fe, which is the overall school district that she belongs to. She graduated from Our Lady of the Annunciation and St. Pius X High School. And since 2007, she has served within the diocese and is now proudly leading St. Mary's Catholic School, a historic institution with over 100 years of legacy and history in educating New Mexico's children. She has a tremendous background. She has a bachelor's in elementary education from New Mexico Highlands University and a master's in educational leadership and administration from Creighton University. She is deeply committed to Catholic education, which she values for its Christ-centered classrooms, emphasis on virtuous behavior, and academic excellence. And her quote, I love this quote because it's one that I'm reading St. Augustine's Confessions now. She says, "Work as if everything depended on you, and pray as if everything depended on God." Wow, did we get all that right, Rebecca?
That was quite an introduction. Thank you.
Well, thank you for being on. And I know you go by Becky. So which do you want me to use during the interview?
Well, I typically only get called Rebecca when I'm in trouble. So Becky.
All right. Well, I will stop making you feel like you're in trouble, and I'll call you Becky from now on. So thank you for being on the Lead Different podcast. You know, we met probably a couple of years ago. We met at your school, and I am very familiar with your school because my oldest daughter went to your school, and she is, gosh, I don't want to say how many years ago, but about 27 years ago, she was at St. Mary's School. My wife taught there. My wife went there, so my daughter graduated from there. And my wife's grandfather was in the first graduating class from St. Mary's way back in 1914, I believe.
Wow. Well, we were around then. So yeah.
Yeah, it is the oldest Catholic school in New Mexico, is it not?
No, actually the oldest Catholic school is 𝗠𝗿𝗵𝗀𝗃 in our diocese.
That's right.
They're just a couple years older than we are. And so I always say, you know, if you didn't go to St. Mary's, you certainly know someone who did, because it is that school. For sure.
It is that school, and especially in the older age group when it was a high school, right? There were a lot of kids there, but you know, we're on a national and we're on a worldwide audience, so everybody's probably like, what are they talking about in Albuquerque? But so let me give you guys the reason Becky is on the podcast. So she is an elementary school principal who is doing some things different than a lot of elementary school principals. I had the pleasure of being invited to do a keynote for her and her fellow principals a couple of months ago, and that's how we met. And then Becky and I started talking, and I found that we had a lot of things in common. And one of the things that we have in common, and we'll get into her YOS later, is she's not afraid to try things that are unconventional and different. And she's not afraid to do things that are outside of the box. And I said, you know, I have a podcast, Becky. And what I would like to talk about on that podcast is how people are leading different. So that's what we're going to talk about. For if you're an educator, if you're a consultant or a coach that works with educators, I think you're going to get a lot of value out of the things that we're going to talk about with Becky today, how she's leading different, how she is doing some things in her school that other people aren't doing, and how it's helping her stand out from everyone else who does what she does. So is that okay for an agenda for today, Becky?
That works. Yeah, that works great.
Yeah. Well, let's get started. I'll start with the question that I like to ask. What made you? What attracted you to education, Becky?
Oh, well, I had children that were in school. I was a stay-at-home mom. Some of my kids were struggling in school at the time. They were little. And I didn't quite understand why teachers were doing what they were doing. And I felt that I could do it differently, and in some cases do it better. And as parents, we know our kids best. And so that's kind of how I landed up in education. I started substitute teaching at my children's school. And it was one of those moments where I was following the lesson plan to the T, and I was losing the kids. They weren't engaged. They didn't like what we were doing. So I just changed it up on my own with no formal training whatsoever. And it worked. It was the aha moment that kids get. And for teachers, that is a big part of why we do what we do. We love that aha moment when a kid gets something for the first time and that you were responsible for making that happen. So that's what happened to me. And I'll never forget, I was substitute teaching in a 5th grade class. I came home and it was like, I want to be a teacher. I'm going to go to school to be a teacher. I had no college education whatsoever. I had 3 little kids. And so in January of 2001, I enrolled in my local university to begin getting a bachelor's degree in elementary ed.
So January 2001, that doesn't seem like that long ago, but it's 23 years ago, 23. Oh, it's going to be 24 years in a few weeks, right? So you enrolled and you went and got your bachelor's in education.
Yeah, it wasn't quite that easy. I had 3 little kids, and then the month after I started school, I was pregnant with my 4th child. And so kind of did everything the hard way, but that's quite all right. That's sometimes how some of us have to operate. So took about 7 years, but finished college, graduated at the nice ripe age of about 41. And so that's
I love that. I love the thought of going to school at an older age. I got my MBA at 50 years old. So I know where you are now. I did have my bachelor's. I went the traditional route, but you did something really, really cool that I want to dig into. You had 3 little ones and then 1 on the way. And it took you 7 years. What drove you? Because how old were your kids when you started? Your 3 that were born already.
Oh my goodness, they were probably 4, 6, and 8. So they were pretty little.
High maintenance.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they need their mom. They and they need their dad. And so I have an incredibly supportive husband. So that's why I was able to go to school. And back then, there was no online school. There was correspondence courses. So I did a lot through correspondence so I could still stay home and be available for the kids. So
4, 6, and 8 and 1 on the way. And that's when you started studying. So you were substitute teaching. Now, what school was this?
Gallup Catholic. And it doesn't exist anymore, but it's in Gallup, New Mexico.
Yeah. So for those of you around the world that aren't familiar, Gallup, New Mexico is a small town on the western end of New Mexico going into the Arizona border. And it is all by itself out there. And it's a very small town. Everyone knows everyone in Gallup, New Mexico. I bet if I told you some of the friends that I have who are from Gallup, you'd probably know them. But they're 4, 6, and 8. They're going to school. You're doing correspondence courses. Your husband is working. How did you make it work?
You got to be really organized. So, my husband was in a position at that time where he could control his call schedule. And so he would make sure that he was home at certain times so I could go to school on the nights that I went to class. And so, it was a gradual process for sure. It was not fast by any means. There were some semesters I would just take 1 class because due to the family schedule, I could only fit that in. But, it worked through the support of each, my husband and and I thought it was real important for my kids to see their mom as a lifelong learner.
That is, I love that thought of, hey, you can get your bachelor's degree in your 40s and you went and got your master's degree also.
Yes.
So why? You were already a teacher. You were certified. Tell me about obviously you're a lifelong learner. You talked about that love of education. So what made you say, you know what, I want to go get my master's degree?
I don't think I ever really set out to be a principal, but I will say that when you're in education, you see things that go a certain way and you're like, well, why do we do it that way? Why can't we do it differently? Has anybody ever thought about doing X, Y, and Z? And so that was kind of the motivation behind it, and just the love of learning. So I was learning all these things in theory, but I couldn't apply them because I wasn't in a leadership role. And so that's kind of how I landed up into a principalship.
You know, it's so funny. A lot of people would take that, right? And I meet these people, we all meet them. They're frustrated because their leadership isn't doing things the right way or the way they would do them, but they just live with it. You took a different approach. You said, you know what, I'm going to go get a master's degree in educational leadership, right? I think it was educational leadership and administration from just a little known university like Creighton, right? You didn't shoot low. So you go to Creighton. Now, was that correspondence or online, or did you do that in person?
It was a hybrid model. So there was some in person over the summers, and then during the school year online. And it was rigorous for sure. And it was, but I mean, I learned so much and was able to apply a lot of that, not just in the classroom, but also in my principalship.
And you were a lot younger than, I mentioned, I got my MBA at 50, and you forget how much of the learning process is those synapses. Kind of, you forget about the studying and the testing and the things you need to do. You were a little bit younger than I was when I did that, but you also probably had some different challenges because by then your kids were probably in their teens and some driving. And so you were dealing with different challenges. Yeah. What was different getting that bachelor's degree in the early 2000s versus when you got your master's degree when the kids were a little bit older?
Well, I think in both scenarios, because I was a non-traditional student and I was older, I was incredibly focused in both situations. But I was your age when I got my master's as well. So, but the difference, I guess, is that when you can apply what you're learning right then and there, that's really when learning takes place. And that's really effective learning. And that's what it was for me once I got my master's, is that I was able to apply what I was learning right there for the most part, and to see how systems were working and to be able to apply that. When you're going to school to be a teacher, I wasn't in the classroom except as a sub. So I really couldn't apply everything I was learning in my undergrad because I really wasn't full-time employed. I was, just kind of subbing here and there. I was mostly a mom.
Interesting. So but I like that you said that, because in the same way, my at the time when I started my MBA program, I was leading teams in the medical device industry, and my MBA was in pharmaceutical marketing and management. And so I could take the stuff I learned and literally apply it right then and there. And you were able to do the same thing as you were doing that versus when you were getting your bachelor's. What led you to St. Mary's?
Oh, Jesus Christ, for sure. I never, ever dreamed I would be a principal of a school like this. Never. And so this kind of came my way after I had just been out of school for a couple years, and I applied, and it was an instant connection with the interview team, and I think that was a big part of it. And then there was a lot of prayer associated with it too, because you always want to make sure that you're answering God's call, you're doing His work to glorify His kingdom, right? And is this really where you want me? So there's always those questions that I think people ask themselves, believers ask themselves when they're making employment changes or career changes. And so that's kind of how I landed up here at St. Mary's. And so it's been 6 years now, and it's gone by super fast. But it's been quite the ride, and it's been an incredibly rewarding journey to be here.
So I have to ask you this question, because you mentioned that your motivation for wanting to get into education and eventually to get into leadership was you saw that there was a better way, right? There's got to be, why do we have to do it that way? And you saw yourself, and we're going to talk about your YOS, because our listeners, a lot of them are coaches who are familiar with the YOS discovery. So they're going to want to know what your Y operating system is. So we'll tell them that later. But what have you found is harder than you thought it might be, because a lot of us, I'll tell you, my leadership experience, I always said, well, if I was there, I would do things differently. And then you get there and you're like, holy crap, it's a lot harder to do things differently than it looked like when I was being led by those people. What's the biggest reality check you got when you became an administrator and you had the power to make those decisions? Were you able to implement the changes that you saw were necessary when you were in the trenches and following maybe some guidance that you didn't think was so great? And what was the biggest thing you were able to change? Tell us that. And what was the one thing that you found was really hard to change and you had to really work at it?
Probably one of the first things we had to change here was the culture. And that's also one of the hardest things to change, is the culture. And I think overall, my biggest lesson was change is not fast. And I'm one of these people like, why wasn't that done yesterday? Come on, let's go, move. I don't do anything slowly very often, except, maybe drive every now and then. But everything, I'm on cruise control. Let's go, let's move. So I think that was a hard thing, is to realize that not everybody moves at the speed of lightning like you do, or you think you do. Mm-hmm. So that was a reality check, is, okay, we're going to have to take this slow, because that's how we're going to handle it. And that's how people can take in the information, process it, and apply it, just like kids, right? So teachers are the same way. And so the change, it has to be slow, and it has to be very deliberate. There has to be explanations given for change. You can't just make a change and say, oh, well, it's good for kids. That's important, but there's a lot of unpacking when things are good for kids. And so we have to do that as a team. And so I think changing the culture was a big thing. I came into St. Mary's when they were at a steady downhill decline in enrollment, to the point where it was rather scary. The life of the school was in question. And so I think that's why it took Father Broussard a while to make that decision to hire me, because he also wanted to make sure that he was putting the right person in the right place. And so when we all came to that conclusion that this was the right decision, it was very apparent to me that we needed some culture changes. My team was wounded. My team was not trusting of the leader, of me. They didn't know me. They didn't know to trust me. They were very cautious. I always like to joke about my office is next door to the teacher's lounge. And I would hear them talking and giggling in there. And I would walk in and they'd just stop talking. And it was like, oh, we have some work to do. So we've done some of that work. We've been voted top workplaces 5 years in a row. That comes from my team. It doesn't come from me. And so when we first got our first top workplaces, that's when I knew we were making the right decisions. We were making the right choices, because their feedback on that anonymous survey, reading the feedback and not knowing who wrote what, was incredibly powerful for me as a leader.
So best place to work is not an easy award to win, because like you said, it is anonymous. So people are going to be honest, and they're going to tell you whether they really like working there or not. And to do it consistently 5 years in a row, that's fantastic. So congratulations on that. How do you balance being a best place to work without becoming a people pleaser? Because that's something that can happen to us, right? You've been a best place to work. How do you continue to do that? What gives you the confidence to make the tough decisions, even though you think you have to keep in mind that could actually lead to a step down in that ranking? Or how do you handle it so that you can keep your eye on the goal and continue to be a best place to work for so many years in a row?
So one of the things that we do here at St. Mary's is I don't believe in top-down leadership. That I just don't think that works. So when we have decisions to make, or we have changes to make, we make them collaboratively. I have an amazing, strong leadership team. We sit down, we talk about it, we unpack it. They always bring something to the table that I didn't think about. And that's the important thing, is because when you get into your own little silo and you think, well, this is the right way, this is what we should be doing. But the minute you open it up to other perspectives and opinions and thought processes, then you really then you have an opportunity to make the right decision, because then you've got other feedback and other perspectives that come to the table that make that decision so much easier to make when you involve a leadership team. And then there's other times when it's not just my leadership team, it's my entire teaching and staff team that, okay, what are we going to do here? We did a lot of that during COVID, because I had just started. I was just hired the year COVID happened. And so, my staff didn't know me, and I'm saying, we're not closing, we're staying open. And they're just like, how? And I'm like, well, I don't know how we're going to do this, but we're going to figure it out. So let's put our brains together and let's figure it out. So it was not easy, but I think that was probably a really valuable lesson to me as well, is just knowing that we are always better together. And I know that sounds very cliche, but you can't make decisions top down, and you can't make decisions alone. You've got to have a strong leadership team to help you with those decisions.
How do you, that's, by the way, that's a great leadership lesson. And that's why I knew this was going to be a great conversation. Because listen, whether you're leading teachers, you're leading salespeople, where you're leading engineers, or you're leading executives, this is just a great lesson. You take the input of the people around you. And one of the things that you've talked about that's really next level is you have a leadership team. So you're not asking everybody every time. You have a core group that you go to that's probably representative of your entire staff. How many total staff do you have?
We have 42 on our team.
So you have a staff of 42. What's your leadership team?
There's 5 of us.
So there's 5 of you on the leadership team, and I'm going to actually get a chance to meet your leadership team soon. We're going to be doing some work together, but I love that you have the insight from those people. And then you decide sometimes that you're going to ask everyone, right? Maybe it's something that stumps the leadership team. And then you say, you know what, why don't we ask the whole staff, and we poll them. But at the end of the day, you're making the decision, right? You can delegate responsibility, the authority. You can delegate authority, but the responsibility still falls on Becky, Maestas Sanchez, and that's who the pastor is going to ask. Hey, why did that happen, right? Regardless, if you can tell them, well, we can do like Adam and say, well, the woman that you put in the garden told me to do it, right? Yeah, the teachers told me to do it. Well, guess what? You're in charge. So how do you balance taking that input? Has that ever backfired on you, where you're taking the input from them and you implement a decision? Or, because I have found that for the most part works really well. Can you think of a time where it didn't, and then you had to change direction?
Oh, absolutely. But you know what? And I think it's probably been mostly in our interview process, when we interview somebody and then we get them in here and it's like, whoa, wait, that's not at all who we thought we were hiring. And we have a full team that interviews. I mean, I'm the last person to interview. So we've adopted this business model of interviewing here at our school. So my staff has a big role in the interviewing. And so it's a lot easier, I think, when you collaboratively made a decision and you're like, that really didn't work out so well. But then we get to unpack it. Okay, what did we not see? What did we miss? And it's the same process. You are collaboratively asking the hard questions. What did we miss? What went wrong? And everybody has a role in that. Just like when we're making a decision to change something and implement a new policy, it's the same thing. You unpack it the same way. And so, again, very effective. And I think it's good for my staff to be able to be part of those decisions, because I think it makes them more effective in their leadership role within the classroom and on their, in their grade band levels.
Mm-hmm. Very, very interesting that you talk about the fact that the decision making, at the end of the day, comes down to you. Here's a question. A lot of leaders struggle with what you talked about earlier. When you came in, you'd hear them giggling next door, and then you'd walk in. You had to build trust.
Yeah.
How do you go about building trust? And then, as if that wasn't hard enough, you're the new principal, you're building trust, and then COVID hits, and
Right.
you've got some tough decisions to make. What are some key steps that leaders can take because you've obviously built a great team with a lot of trust that's voted your school a best place to work many years in a row. What are some of the keys that you can share with other leaders that they can use when they're trying to build trust, especially when they're in a new position?
So you build trust one employee at a time. It's not a group situation where you're talking and that kind of thing. I mean, certainly that's a piece of it, but I have check-ins with my staff weekly, and it's scheduled check-ins. And of course, there's always sometimes during the school year where there's something crazy that goes on and we have to reschedule or cancel or whatever. But for the most part, that time is a sacred time, especially for new employees. When new employees come on board, they have a set check-in time with me once a week. If you've been on our team for over a year, you have a set check-in time with me every other week. And a lot of times we're talking about best practices. We're talking about, what their struggles might be in the classroom. Maybe they had they're having a challenge with a student or a parent, or maybe even another employee. A lot of times that's what we talk about, but other times we talk about, the dog that you just had put down 2 nights ago, or your dad who just passed away, or your uncle who just went into hospice. Whatever it is, that's how you build those relationships. And that's how you build trust. And so, I don't, and I say this to my staff all the time, may not always agree with how you handle a situation, but that's a private conversation. So, when we have to kind of have those conversations, those are done in private. But to our students, to our community, we will always be a united front, always. And I think that's a big way to build trust in your staff as well.
And so great answer. Thank you for sharing that. I agree with it 100%. I think the rah-rah speeches, everybody loves that part of it when you've got your whole staff. But guess what? I've done it in coaching and I've done it in leading teams. I also coach track and cross country. And I remember you as a coach, you stand in front of the team and you tell them, let's go win one for the Gipper. But the way you get amazing performance out of athletes or out of anyone, it's in that one-on-one conversation where you get to know, hey, what are they afraid of? What do they fear? What is it that they most want to do? And you get those great insights so that the right thing to say at the right time to get the best out of that person. So kudos to you. That is I'm glad you're reinforcing some of the stuff that I believe also, but you've been so successful at it. Let's get into, if you guys are listening, so our regular listeners they probably can't wait to hear your why operating system. And I know all of them are saying, oh, this lady is a challenge. They are guessing that. And that's why I tell people all the time, you know what, I am done trying to guess people's YOS because they surprise me all the time. So Becky's YOS is clarify, make sense, and contribute. So she is someone who is driven by finding clarity. She is a clarifier. She uses examples. And it's fun because when I ask a clarified person a question, I know I'm going to get a very detailed answer, and she's going to make sure that I understand. And then the other thing that Becky's really good at is asking good questions. One of the things I've learned is you have a very thorough interview process you have a questionnaire of questions that must be answered by everybody that you hire. And that's how you ensure you get the right people on the team. So your why of clarify definitely stands out. And you've been very honest. You said, Dan, I didn't come up with it, but you found something that had all those questions and you use it religiously. And I'm not, that's not, no pun intended, because you're a Catholic school, but you religiously use that very thorough questionnaire to vet your candidates that you hire so you can bring them into this trusting environment that you created and that they're the right fit. So clarify your why is clarify, your how is make sense. So what everybody has seen, and you've said it a few times, as I listen to you, you know what? If it makes sense to Becky, she's moving forward. As soon as she gets it, she's moving forward. She doesn't need all the information. She needs enough information. Makes sense. People are known for being very decisive. Once they have the information they need, they move forward. The other thing we know about clarify too is even though you may ask a lot of questions, once your questions are answered, you're ready to move forward. So both clarify and make sense can be very assertive. And then, of course, we top it off with contribute. And why else would you be at a private Catholic school earning a fraction of what you could earn doing the exact same job in the public sector? So, Becky, I know you were surprised when you got your results, but now you've had a few weeks to sit with it. How does it feel? How did it feel to you when you first learned clarify, make sense, and contribute was your Y operating system? And how does it feel now that you've had some time to think about it?
Well, once you have a minute to kind of process it all, first I have to apologize. It is pajama day today at our school, and the kids are having parades down the hall, so it is noisy in here. I'm sorry.
If we don't hear kids having fun at your school, it wouldn't be a proper principal interview.
Yeah, I know.
No need to apologize.
So anyhow, I think it just kind of it puts things in perspective. I've done a lot of these, leadership type assessments over the years, and there's always one or two that always come in the same all the time. But clarify was a new one for me, but that's never come up. But I will say that now that I've learned a little bit more about it, it's like, well, I do ask a ton of questions,
right?
And we do that together on our team. Like, okay, what about this? And what about this? Did you think about this? And then, I'm constantly firing away with questions all the time and never even correlated that with a clarifying sense of why I do those things. I just do them. And I think a lot of that came from being a mom. I have 3 sons and a daughter. And so I just remember when they were, interrogate them when things were going not so good. I'm like, and what about this and this? And, I just totally bantered with questions. I hope I listened more than I asked questions, but it just goes together. It's like, it makes complete sense actually now.
That's fantastic. And yeah, I remember, and just so that, and those people who are familiar with the YOS know that there's 9 Ys.
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what? Becky's number 4 is Better Way. So she's not far from where, her right outside of her top 3 sits Better Way. And in her top 6 is Challenge. So, and Trust is in there too. So in your top 6, you have Better Way, Trust, and Challenge. And that's what I call the secondary Ys, the ones that you can easily go into. They're not energy giving as much as clarifying, making sense, and contributing, but finding better ways is definitely a driver for you. There, you've always probably asked the question, there's got to be a better way to do this?
Yeah, not always just a better way, but a different way.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to be like everybody else. We don't want to be like everybody else. How are we going to do this differently?
Yeah. So I brought it up. I'd love to hear about, because that is so thankfully for us, and thankfully for St. Mary's, and thankfully for the Catholic school community, you have not decided to take your tremendous qualifications and go to a public sector where you can probably double your salary. What makes you committed to stay where you are and make the difference that you're making for the kids in your school? What is it that drives you to stay there? To contribute and make a difference for a community that desperately needs someone as qualified as you?
Well, there's a great need. There's a great need here at St. Mary's. We are, anywhere from on any given year between a 30 to 40% free and reduced lunch school. So the financial need is very prevalent. A lot of our students are on financial aid. That's huge to me, is to be able to provide a Catholic education for a family that may not normally be able to afford it. And yet they want something better for their children. They don't want their children in a government public school. They want their children in a private, faith-based school where Jesus Christ is the center of the classroom. And that's huge to me. That works. My kids got to go to school that way. I got to go to school that way. My brothers did too. It's just important, and it works. That's why we do it. So there's just always so much work to be done in education, right? That's probably a whole nother podcast, but we don't need to get into all of those details, but there's so much work to be done in our public schools, and there's work to be done in our private schools too. And that's the beauty of this profession, is that you can do something one year and change it up and make it better the next year. And I think that's something that we've really tried hard to do here at St. Mary's, is be on that continuous path of improvement, continuous growing, continuous learning. And I believe we've done that. Our enrollment is continuously growing. Sometimes it doesn't grow as fast as I'd like it, because there's that impatient piece of me again, right? Why can't we do this faster? But for the most part, we've been on that steady trajectory. And slow and steady wins the race. That's how it goes, I guess. But I'm pretty pleased with the direction our school's going, and the families that come to our school. They're clearly partners with us in their children's education. And that's when it works, is when you have that partnership between student, parent, and school. And that's when you get the best results.
Now, I thank you for that answer. You have a tremendous opportunity due to some challenges that you've had recently. You've lost some students, but that means you have capacity. And it's interesting. When you're faced with a challenge like losing a large percentage of your middle school students, you have a choice, and you've made the choice that said, "Hey, we've got capacity. Let's add." What's the mindset that had to, because initially that had to be a shock, right? So just for everybody that's listening that may not be in the know, there was a school in town that opened up, a high school in town that opened up a middle school. So a lot of students that would have been at your school decided, hey, we're going to go there because that's where we're going to high school anyway. And so you lost some students. And rather than take that as oh, darn, shucky me, and feel sorry, you took that as an opportunity for growth, and you're continuing to grow your enrollment. How do you shift that mindset? I know initially it must have been a shock, but how do you flip the switch and say, okay, let's put a plan together and let's grow?
So our school is pre-K through 8th grade. And when you're running a school and you're trying to boost enrollment, you don't boost enrollment in the middle of your school, like in 6th grade or 4th grade or 3rd grade. You build the school from the bottom up. So that's where our big heavy numbers are in our early childhood grades and elementary grades. And our middle school is small, but in our middle school, we have an enrichment program, we have electives, we have teachers that are incredibly committed. And we know, and we sell this way, when you come to St. Mary's and you're wanting to come in middle school, which some people do, you're going to get a lot of attention. You're not going to be in a class of 28, 30 kids. You're going to be in a smaller class. You're going to be challenged. We're going to push you. Not working, not doing the work, not turning in assignments, not an option here. But we also know that St. Mary's is not for everybody, and that's okay. That is totally okay, because we're fine with what the direction our school's going and what we've implemented. So I think one of the things you were leading to, Dan, was we started a dual language program in 2020 here at St. Mary's. Currently, we are the only Catholic dual language school in the state of New Mexico. We shouldn't be, but we are. And that came because when I first started here and I looked up the demographics of our school, at that time we were an 87% Latino school. And once I got in here and I started meeting the kids and meeting the families, it became very apparent that about 80% of that 87% did not speak the language. And I'm part of that. So what are we going to do to fix that? That was an opportunity to do something different than anybody else has ever done here in the Diocese of Archdiocese of Santa Fe. There's lots of dual language schools around New Mexico, but our school is a little bit different because our dual language program, for whatever reason, I didn't know it was going to go this route, but it attracted mostly English-speaking students. They might have a mom or a dad or a grandparent, somebody in the family that speaks Spanish, but Spanish is not typically the first language spoken in that home. It's mostly English. And so these are families, both with and without Spanish surnames, that wanted biliteracy for their children. So as it stands right now, over a third of our enrollment is in our dual language program. So when you come to St. Mary's, you have your choice of going into a dual language program or going into the English program, which we've been known for many, many, many years. We modeled our program after Boston College's two-way immersion network that is specifically designed for Catholic schools. So we receive our professional development, we receive our coaching through them, and then we meet once a year to network with the other twin schools, we call them, around the nation. There's about 30 of us around the nation. And so it's been an incredible journey to be able to implement a program like that in this school. And I will say, a lot of times in education, we say, well, you teach with the end in mind. I can clearly tell you, I did not have an end in mind at all when we started this program. I just knew there was a need. And so we ran with it. I had a teacher that was a very good friend of mine that was a dual language teacher, and she came on board and helped me do this program. And I was I will be real honest, I was a little nervous about doing this program because I'm not bilingual. And so how are you going to run a bilingual school when you're the principal and you can't speak the language? Well, it's just like anything else. When you're not good at something, you find people that are. And so I am surrounded by literate educators and team members, and they translate for me when I need it. They help me if I need extra verbiage to help with a tour. If the family that's touring isn't quite understanding what I'm saying because they're not proficient in English, or that maybe they are, it's different, with everybody that comes in. So that program has been incredibly rewarding to have here at St. Mary's. We started in pre-K. It's a 90-10 model, which means 90% of the day is in Spanish, 10% is in English. And we do pre-K and kinder as a 90-10 model. And then when they go to first grade, it's an 80-20 model. And so we gradually incorporate the English. They probably get a little bit more English than some, just because they come from English speaking. And when they go to their enriching classes, those are all in English as well. The biggest adjustment for families who put their children in a dual language program is to understand that the reading and the writing don't come as quickly as they do for children in a monolingual program, such as English. So, but what the data shows us, and we're getting there because our program is such a young program, and we have our program now up to third grade. Next year, we'll add fourth grade, so we're just adding a grade every year. And what the data tells us is that by the time these kids get to fourth, fifth, and sixth grade, they are outperforming their monolingual counterparts in both English and Spanish, in reading and writing, and now science. So when we started this program, we were just going to do it up to fifth grade because the data says 5 years of a dual language program and kids are biliterate. Well, then our local high school, Catholic high school, opened up a mid-school. So our mindset has changed. We now believe and will practice this dual language program throughout our entire middle school once it gets there. Because we have to have something, you have to continue to have something that no one else has. And so as of right now, having a dual language program has been quite instrumental in our school sustaining enrollment, our school being marketable in that arena. And we're just kind of a standalone school as far as that goes. And so I would love to have another partner school to work with on this. But until that happens, we'll be the only one, and that's okay.
So you have you have partner schools that you meet with, right? You around the country, but you don't have anyone in the Archdiocese of Santa Fe. So to those schools that are listening, other principals in the Archdiocese, will definitely invite them to, and I'm sure they know because I know that this is an Archdiocese of principals that do get together probably at least once a quarter, so you get a chance to talk about what you're doing. I love that is such a great differentiator for you, and you've made it a differentiator. And now you have the stats to back up the decision you made to introduce this program. And absolutely, we all know, my first language was Spanish. And so learning Spanish, you learn to spell phonetically. I was an amazing speller because in Spanish, every letter sounds the same regardless. So if you learn to spell it in Spanish, you know how to spell it in English always. The pronunciation doesn't matter. So I always just say the word in Spanish and I'd say, oh, I know how to spell that. And so there's advantages. Obviously, you mentioned science. When you know the Spanish words, it's like learning Latin, right? Then when you learn the Spanish word, for something, you learn how to see the root. And so science gets easier because you start seeing, oh, there's patterns in the words that I need to learn in order to be able to identify animals and plants and everything else, the chemicals that are out there. So what a great advantage that you're giving to your students. Becky, what's tell us about your biggest why not moment? Was that the dual language, being the only dual language Catholic school in New Mexico?
Yeah. I was like, why not? And the big thing was we had been talking about this. The dual language teacher that I mentioned to you, her name is 𝗕𝗏𝗏𝗂𝗏𝗏𝗏, and we had been talking about it. And so we were getting ready to launch this in March. And what happened in March of 2020? The pandemic. Yeah. And so I remember sitting there and saying, what do you want to do, Jane? Should we put it on the back burner or should we just go forward with it? Oh, heck with it. Let's just do it. So we got on Facebook Live, and we launched it. And people were chiming in and asking questions and stuff. And it was like, okay, I don't know where this is going to go, but we're going to just do it. And it just, I mean, I knew there was a need, but I didn't really know how to carry this out. So I needed the advice of the experts that knew this stuff far better than I did and spoke the language as well. And so, we have our little third grade kids who are our little pioneers in dual language. And it is just beautiful to watch them and how they're integrating two languages seamlessly in their education. So I have learned so much from these kids just watching it. And then when it's time to test kids, and we test in both English and Spanish, we want to make sure there's no language loss in either one. Right. And sometimes, they do a little, sometimes the Spanish is a little higher, sometimes the English is, and that's very normal, but it's fascinating to look at that data and to be able to say, okay, now this makes sense, why this is happening.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, what a gift that is for your kids. So Becky, I've got one more question. I want to ask you, how did you get started in leadership? What was it that drew you to be in leadership?
Oh, Dan, I don't think I had a choice. Our parents raised my brothers and I with leadership skills. It was what they knew. My dad was an entrepreneur. My mom was a stay-at-home mom for a long time. And they just led us with, it was clearly understood, faith, family, service. That's just was instilled in us. And I'm not sure that they knew that, okay, we're going to raise our kids with that. I think that's all they knew. And so that's what they instilled in the three of us. And as a result, all three of us have leadership jobs and roles within our communities. And so it's pretty cool, I think, when kids are raised with that leadership mindset, just at the core of who they are. And that's what it was for us. It just, I didn't go to school right out of high school. I was kind of a late bloomer. I went to school way late in life. But as my oldest brother always says, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And so I think we're all finishing pretty strong in our respective careers and in our leadership roles. So it definitely came from our parents. There are programs for leadership, but that's nothing compared to what you get when you're raised by leaders.
Yeah, and you went to school. So this is a great question. As an educator, so your master's is in educational leadership and administration. Was some of that stuff that you were like, well, no, duh, I know this already because I grew up learning leadership. And what was new? Were there any new twists that you learned at Creighton that maybe you or maybe a twist on something that your parents had taught you that was different or a different perspective?
Well, I think when you're learning about leadership in theory, it looks very different than what leadership actually is.
Right.
I never got to learn about what a leader should do in a pandemic. I never got to learn about what a leader should do when she's confronted by an irate parent. You don't learn those skills, but you learn those skills of confrontation. You learn those skills of de-escalation. You learn those skills of, project management and those types of things from your upbringing. That's how I learned a lot of those skills. definitely not a perfectionist in any of those skills, but definitely was exposed to them. And so it was familiar to me because we grew up learning those things.
Yeah. Well, Becky, this has been a fabulous conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on leadership. I know, listen, whether you're an educator, whether you're an executive leader, whether you're a CEO or a founder, I know there's some great nuggets on leadership, on how to lead different from our interview with Becky today. So I hope you guys are taking notes. Make sure you tune in. As always, we always ask you to like, share, and comment on the podcast, whether you're listening on LinkedIn, on YouTube, or on any of your podcast platforms. Let your friends know about the Lead Different podcast. Let them know about Becky, Maestas Sanchez, the principal at St. Mary's School in Albuquerque, the only dual language Catholic school in the Archdiocese of Santa Fe, who's doing some amazing things and leading different. So, Becky, what do you say we end the show on that note?
Why not?
Thank you so much, Becky. It has been a pleasure to have you on. We will let you get back. It sounds like you've got a great party going on at the school, so we're going to let you get back to being that fun principal that I think we're having pajama day, and I can verify, you guys can't see it, but she had to go and rearrange some stuff in her office. She is in her pajamas today, so she is that principal that joins in the party. So thank you so much for being on, Becky. We look forward to talking to you soon, and I can't wait to work with your team at St. Mary's School.
Likewise. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, Becky.
This is Lead Different.
Subscribe now. Discover a new era of leadership. Lead different because great leaders change the world.
Why not leadership? Why not lead different? When you do the things that everyone else does, you get the same results as everyone else gets. Let's do things a little different. Let's lead different. And ask yourself this. Why not?